Thank you, Andrea, and now I will call Giovanni De Santi for the panel on optimizing the energy system.
So thank you very much, Riccardo. Again, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once more from me and from my side. So I think we need to possibly also gain time and try to respect the plan. So I'll try to be very short in my introduction, leave more space if possible to the presentations and also to the final debate. I would really like to involve you, if it's possible, with a few questions that you might like to raise. So this subsection, as it was already clear, he said, is focused on the system. We said that if you want to develop an intelligent, smart, optimized energy system, we need to go for a smart, intelligent, and side for the demand and for the supply. But in between, we also need an intelligent infrastructure, an intelligent system which may link the two extremes. So this subsection, we will look at the energy system as such, understanding how we can make it, again, in future, much more flexible, much more intelligent. And to do this, of course, we need to look at the overall components. So, of course, we talk about smart grids. This is obvious. But we need to understand how to make it also more flexible and respect other things like the demand. So the system, the demand, the storage, because it's clear the storage is becoming one key issue for the future business model. So how do we properly introduce this kind of storage? Who has to manage the storage? How do we develop around this the future, again, use of the electricity and the energy? So also for generation, again, we need to adapt the generation to the flexible demand. So demand, generation, transmission, storage, And finally, also how to possible better connect the different energy carriers, power to gas. So it's clear that in future, the energy system is so complex that we need to abandon the previous way to look at electricity, to look at gas, to look at oil. I think in future, we need to have just one system which can compensate each other, can dialogue to the different system. And this is at the moment not possible, but it's growing. And this is definitely one of the key challenges in front of us. And the very first, including transport, including ICT. And if you look at the smart city, I think this is a very first interesting and positive demonstration that in the end it's possible. Of course, smart city is the very first step, and then we need to go not to cities, but to systems and to regions, and then possible to Europe. So I think today we will see from different perspectives what are the future and the present efforts to develop from different angles this kind of intelligent future system. So again, from research, from utilities, from demonstration at urban and city level. So this, I think, is very important because, as I said, the future system will be completely different. Now, it's the question to us, do we want to make it intelligent, to regulate it, or we want us to develop on its own, without any regulation, without any kind of intelligent guidance? This is up to us, because it will develop, that's for sure. And therefore, we will have a completely and decentralized generation of energy. There will be completely increase of electricity, also in the final demand, so electricity will grow. There will be the introduction of electrical vehicles, very possible and very probably. So again, there will be another variable absorption or generation of electricity. There will be also future flexible demand. So if our citizens will be empowered with advanced ICT and advanced smart meters to understand the cost, to understand what is the moment to disconnect or to reconnect themselves to the net, there will be another additional variable that has to be considered in the future business model. So I think that all these things do require, in the end, if you like, definitely breakthrough in the technology and innovation. So we need to have our own base knowledge, but also fantasy to understand how the future will require breakthrough on both technology, but also on financial measures. So we need, again, to accommodate, as I said before, different solutions, different aspects, including storage, which is going to be, again, one of the key elements for the future system. And therefore, we need to understand, and we will do now today, what are the real progress, what are the real challenges, what are the real future possible achievements that we have in front of us. So I think I can be very short by saying that I'm very eager now to listen to the 4 speakers that I'm going now to call on the podium to see what are their expectations, what are their efforts, what are their, let's say, experience. Also, how to get profit from the real local demonstration, for the real local entity, from the real local progress, how then to get benefit from what they're doing, and how to expand and upscale what they're doing to a much larger society dimension. I think that this is very important to see what is in front of us for the future of the system. So, having said that, I would like again to introduce the 4 speakers that are now going to join me. And again, as you will see, they represent different perspectives, different angles of the system, so they could introduce to you different, let's say, targets that they want to achieve for the system. But in the end, the system as such should be managed by the community. So they will never represent the entire vision of the community, but all of them are important as essential components of the final vision. It's up to us, the scientific community, entrepreneurs, and whoever, to understand how to join them together in a way that the citizen will recognize, this is what I want, this is the best system I can in fact get use of it. So I would like to introduce first of all Alain Burtin. Burtin is the director of the Energy Management Program for the Research and Development Department of EDF. Merci, Alain. Then Inge Phil-Biriel, she is again the head of Research and Development on Energinet, Denmark. So Inge, please come to the podium. Then Michele De Nigris is the director for the Department Transmission Distribution Technology of RSA SPA. Good morning, Michele. And then Thomas Madreiter is the director for Urban Development and Planning, City of Vienna. So again, we will have the research, the local community, utilities, and TSO. So you see, we have different important actors which, however, have to contribute to the same final output, integrated output. So I would like to go first through the 4 presentations, and then again, I would really like to have a possible very alive conversation, questions, if it's possible, because we are running always against the time, and I know Riccardo is looking at me like to say, go ahead, because here we need also to respect the time. So I would like to invite, first of all, Alain, to make your first speech, and to tell us what EDF plans about the future energy system. Thank you.
Thank you. So the objective is to reduce CO2 emissions, and that means develop energy efficiency to decarbonate the energy mix and to also develop efficient electricity uses like electric vehicles and heat pumps. This challenge means to modify significantly the way we optimize and we develop the electricity system, and that's what I want to develop today with a specific focus on the challenge linked to development of intermittent renewable generation. First of all, the point is that in order to decarbonate the mix, we need to develop renewable energy sources. If you look at the current situation, 19% of the world energy is produced by renewable sources. But most of this comes from hydro plants. In Europe, we developed hydro plants in the 20th century, and nowadays we don't have any more big opportunities to develop this energy, so we have to go to other sources. Wind power in the global world comes second, and is correspond today to close to be cost-efficient technology developing everywhere in the world. Europe was a precursor in this field, but now my graph is old, but now the first development is in Asia and also in America. So it's developing everywhere in the world. The problem is how to integrate this new source of energy in the energy mix. I will detail this point. The other sources of renewable sources are today less than 1% of the global energy mix, electricity mix in the world, with emerging technologies like photovoltaic and wind offshore that have same similarity with wind power, that mean intermittency and distributed resources. First of all, we have to mention that this generation is located far from the consumption. As it has been said, the consumption is now concentrated in cities, and these sources of energy are reparted everywhere in the country and in different locations that we had before with the centralized generation. So that means developing new networks and operating this network in a different way that we were accustomed to do in the past. And this should be one of them to be kept in mind when optimizing this development. This slide is maybe difficult to see. I will try to explain the content. Wind power is known as to be an intermittent source of generation. On the left graph, you see in green the generation of a windmill specific plant. If you look at the red curve, it is the sum of the generation of different mills in the Burtin region in France, and you can see that it's more smooth than the previous one. And if you look at the blue curve, you have the profile of the wind generation in the scale of the French system. The first conclusion is that network help smoothing the profile of wind power generation. So developing, due to using the network, we are able to smooth the generation. We don't need to have a storage linked to each power plant, but we can take profit of natural compensation between sites using network. The second point is the variability of this generation. If we look at the right graph, it is a result of simulation we did in EDF R&D, looking at global generation of a wind park reparted in the whole Europe. Today we have 100 gigawatts of, something like 100 gigawatts of windmill in Europe. We simulated a new mix with 300 gigawatts in Europe, and we simulated the output of this the global output of this mix. The result is given of the graph. We have the daily generation for 30 years of climate meteorological years. The first constat we can do is that there is a seasonality of the generation. You have twice the summer generation in winter, but the most important point is that the dispersion, the variability of this generation is very strong during the winter. With 300 gigawatts, we have an average output of 60 gigawatts, but in winter we may have a difference for the same day of generation of 120 gigawatts for this mix of plants. What does it mean? That means that we need for the day in which we have low wind in Europe, we will need a big amount of backup capacity in order to balance the system. This slide shows the result of a simulation we did in the context of the high-risk scenario of the European Union in 2030 with 700 gigawatts of intermittent generation in the mix. On the first line, you have the profile of demand and the variability of demand due to thermal sensitivity. What we can see is that we have to face a variability of demand of something like 30 gigawatts a day. That means 7% of variability on the balance between generation and consumption. In the year 2020, with the current policy, we will have increased variability linked to development of wind power and also photovoltaic power that will lead to 90 gigawatts today as a variability. That means 30% of the residual demand. And the third simulation on the lower part of the slide shows the result of the high scenarios of 2030 with 30% of intermittent generation, and we see that the variability should be 100% of the residual demand. What does it mean? That means that we need backup capacity to sustain the system. With 700 gigawatts, we spare only 90 gigawatts of capacity. So we have to get additional sources. And the second point is that we need additional capacity or flexibility in the system in order to cope with the variability of this generation. Ça marche pas. It doesn't work, sorry. This flexibility is needed from the very short term to the long term. So we need capacity margin in order to cover periods in which we have a low generation of intermittent sources. We need also to get margin in order to adapt at very near to the real time the demand, the generation to demand. And this flexibility today is done by a thermal plant. So as in the future we will have less generation by this thermal plant, we will need to have more flexibility, and we will need to get this flexibility for other sources, because we will have some period in which we will have low, almost all the generation did by renewable sources without any thermal plant in the scenario 2030 I showed before. So we need to get flexibility from demand and also from renewable energy sources that would have to contribute to services, to the system services in the future. The difficulty would be to be able to aggregate the flexibilities, because this flexibility will not be concentrated sorry, I have difficulties to come back. So we have to aggregate these flexibilities and to take advantage on demand on storage capacity. Sorry. On this slide, you have an example of the contribution of active demand to the flexibility to the system. This example, I've given the example of the domestic hot water storage in France that has been developed in the year 85 and so on. And we have today, with the hot water storage the equivalent capacity of storage than the French hydro plants that are one of the most important hydro capacity in Europe. So the demand can be a source of flexibility for the system, very important source of flexibility for the system, and we use the optimization of demand could be used for load shaping and also to limit need of peak capacity. And if we consider development of electric vehicle, we have the same type of problematic that we had with hot water storage. That means that if we optimize this the charge of electric vehicle, we may use the period with low demand in order to charge this vehicle, limited the need of installed capacity, and also make profit of lower prices for this. A slide in order to mention the role of active distribution network. Before, network was designed in order to provide energy to the consumption. Now, these networks need to incorporate this generation and more active demand. So that means to develop the smartness of this network, and also to develop the market design for this. If we want that to do it in an efficient way, we need to build rules that will define the way we can access to network and the way the safety of the system will be done. And all this should be done, in my sense, in order to take profit of the synergies with the global system. As we have seen in the previous slides, there are synergies between different sources in the mix, and we need to. Yes, I go to the conclusion. We need to optimize globally the system. In order to conclude, two messages. First, we need smart grids in order to operate the system tomorrow. This is a worldwide market developing today. Europe is only 10% of this market. And second point, we need to make profit of different sources of flexibility in the system. We will need all the sources. We need to develop forecasting methods in order to reduce uncertainty of renewable generation. We need to improve flexibility of existing plants. We need participation of renewable sources to the flexibility of the system. We need active demand. We need storage like hydro storage, thermal storage, batteries. And we need also to develop the network in order to achieve an efficient integration of intermittent sources in the system. And the last point is that the market design, the market is an opportunity to mobilize the synergies between different sources, and it should be developed and used for that. But we have to take in account the problem of the long-term investment. Market is an efficient way to optimize the short-term balance of the system, but doesn't respond to the long-term needs for return on investment. I will take.